everybody. Welcome to On the Clock with Caroline Clark. I'm Caroline Clark, and today I am joined by someone who heads a brand that we have all known and loved for a very long time. And because she's been so generous with her own life and her own journey and her own heart, many of us, especially if you're on social media, you feel like you really know and love her too. Lisa Price, the founder of Carol's Daughter, is here with us. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy we finally got to do this.
I know, right? It took too long in this time of COVID. Lisa, I think we all know you as Carol's Daughter, right? That's how you're sort of emblazoned in our minds. But particularly during this time, I know that you have been kind of on mama overload. You are mothering in all directions. You have children who returned home. You have a child still at home. You have a dog who I know thinks of you as mama. You have your brother there with you, depending upon you. You have your employees. You have your followers on social media, where I feel like you've sort of really stepped into a new place since COVID began on social media. And it's very much a kind of, Earth Mother, Wonder Mother vibe. I don't know if that's what you were going for, but that's what I'm getting anyway. So I kind of want to just find out to start. You've been home since March 9th. And here we are, almost at the end of August, which is crazy. So have you felt that? Have you felt like all of your mothering skills have been brought into stark relief during this time?
Absolutely. I didn't realize that that's what was going to happen. When the quarantine started, because it started early for me. And initially I thought, oh, maybe I'll be home for about 3 weeks, a month. And you start the type of person that I am. I start thinking about closets and filing and projects that I haven't gotten to and all these things that I'm going to get done because I don't have to worry about traveling somewhere. Working from home was something that I was very accustomed to in the past, having built the company in my house. And I thought it was going to be so easy to just fall back into that routine. But I had done such a good job of separating church and state that I began to feel like, well, when do I relax? When does mom go away and like the worker step in? Like, oh wait, no, they can still see me. Like mom is still here, even though I'm at work. So that was awkward, and had to get adjusted to it. And then I guess in the social media world, the younger people would think of me more as an auntie. That's the preferred colloquialism, if you will, versus mother. And I definitely feel like I have been big auntie mode for this whole time. People DMing me things, texting me things, asking me questions about things, being in spaces that are different for them, and just for whatever reason thinking that I have the answer. And sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't.
Yeah, this time, you and I have connected a few times from the very beginning of this. Mm-hmm. And I hope you're okay, to say that at a certain point during all this, you were dealing with yourself and your health and all the uncertainty surrounding what that was going to be, what it was going to become, while still having all of these people in your house who needed you to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think the uncertainty, most of all, what's been so impressive, especially about how you've been showing up on social media, is that you're not shying away from the fact that you don't have the answers. You're not shying away from a lot of the contradictions of this time. There's a sort of through line there about the fact that there's a lot of silver linings in this,
Mm-hmm.
and you feel good about some of the restful parts of it and other things, but there have been moments of, extraordinary sadness and difficulty. How
Yeah.
have how have you navigated that?
It's been really, really interesting and difficult. And there are times when I keep thinking that I'm through it, and then there's more. So initially, the uncertainty and concern was because I had been exposed to someone that tested positive for COVID. That person is fine, thank goodness. And I never contracted COVID, but for a very long time wasn't really sure, because this was in the very beginning. Every single day the symptoms would change. Every day that you turned out on the news would be like, oh, sense of smell, yeah, I still got that. Oh,
Right.
upset stomach, how's my stomach, and you were just hyper aware of everything. And then it was also difficult kind of being isolated, in the house with people, going down to the kitchen when no one else was in the kitchen, wiping down everything that I touched because I just didn't know. Thankfully I didn't get sick. Thankfully I was okay. Thankfully no one else in my house got sick. But it was a very strange feeling. And at the time that I was sort of being happy about not having to go places, not having to travel, not having to divide myself, enjoying the fact that Becca and I didn't have these hectic mornings of, rushing out the door and dropping her off, that we could sit and have breakfast and talk to each other. And then she would just go upstairs to go to school. Like, all of that was great. But then it was juxtaposed to people dying every single day, and having friends who were losing family members, or who had family members that they couldn't check on. A friend of mine had a mother and father in COVID ICU that she couldn't go see, and that she couldn't talk to because they were on ventilators. They're both still alive, thank God.
Wow.
But so you find yourself saying something like, oh, I'm so grateful that I have this time and I have this peace. And then something comes on the news and you're like, oh yeah, but that's still going on. The other part that was just unexpected, because you didn't think that anything could overshadow a pandemic. But when George Floyd was murdered, we had already had Ahmaud and had just heard about it. And we had whisperings of Breonna. And I remember my dog walker came by one morning, and she is always happy, always positive. And she was in tears. And she just said, we can't even get a break during a pandemic, And there was this, you're trying to deal with it as you've dealt with it many times before. You're trying to process as you've processed many times before. And then because I'm 58, I was raised in a different time. And I realized that being raised in that different time, I'm conditioned differently. So there's a thought process that I go through as a 58-year-old Black person, where unfortunately you automatically begin to question what happened. Well, where was the person? Why were they there? Not that you believe that the victim is responsible, but because of my age and how I've seen these things happen and how I see them handled, I know that I have to be prepared with all of those answers. I'm not allowed to just speak out and say something about this horrible thing that occurred. I have to be prepared to be challenged on all of the facts. And for the first time, I didn't care about any of them. I didn't want to know the background. I didn't want to know why someone was there, who was Brianna affiliated with, why was George at the store. I frankly did not give a shit, because the people should not be dead, period.
Right.
Period. They
Right.
should not be dead. And the freedom of that was monumental, to get to that space where I no longer needed all of these receipts. I no longer need all of this research. It is just wrong, period, full stop. And then finding myself in this place where all of a sudden I was being texted and called by my very well-meaning white friends, very well-meaning. What can I do? What is happening? I don't understand. I thought things were getting better. Why is this happening? And I'm kind of like, dude, I don't know.
Right. I didn't create it.
Tell people, right. You know. Yeah. But you don't want to say that, because you know that they're coming from a really good place. And it was so remarkable to have the conversations with coworkers that were taking place that had never taken place before, and to have, for lack of a better term, everything out in the open. Yeah. You know, and the relief of that. Right. It's a relief and a burden at the exact same time.
You know, it's funny, you use the word freedom, right? And there's that old expression, the truth will set you free. My mother used to say that all the time. The truth will set you free. Probably in some case where she thought I was lying about something, right? But, you know, it takes a long time to kind of understand some of those phrases. And I think that's what you're talking about. And I think what's coming through with you now in even a broader sense is how this period has released you from certain things. So I know there are things that you miss, like travel and the beach, and, you know, and maybe even the glam squad. You're so known for your beautiful nail art and things like that. But there is a freedom, right, in that. And yeah. You mentioned being 58 in the beauty industry, especially as a Black woman, is no small thing. But I know we had a conversation one day and you were talking about how, you know, at some point in all of this, something inside of you just gave way. And you were like, hey, if I show up, you know, on camera with my face beat, awesome. If I don't, it's okay, you know? So can you talk about those moments where you sort of like felt yourself releasing into this freer place, whether it has to do with how you respond about Black Lives Matter, whether it has to do with how you manage, you know, your team and your brand going forward, or how you think about your legacy and what you represent?
I think it's coming from being in this space where there's so much more going on that is so much more important, that it's very hard to kind of justify things that are really frivolous. You know, I cannot justify having a makeup artist come to my home, putting themselves at whatever risk they may in getting to me, and then, you know, potentially putting myself at risk depending on where they've been, just to get concealer. Like, yes, there is artistry to makeup, and that is not all that they do. Right. But now the time for me to sit in my home office, which is just off of my bedroom, just above my kitchen, is now the time that I need to be glammed out when I'm doing an interview with someone. Now, I'm not going to show up unbathed, hair not combed, you know, no jewelry, but there are just some things that I feel like I can let go for now, because they're really not important. And there was a little bit of nervousness the first time that I did it. And I usually do put some makeup on. Today happened to be one of those days when I didn't get around to it. And there's some construction going on, so I can't even get to my bathroom right now. But I was doing an HSN show one morning, and there were some technical difficulties. And I literally went on air with lip gloss and a really funky lamp situation with like a piece of fabric over it to soften things. And it was fine. You know, like people were watching, and I checked with coworkers. I was like, did I look okay? Because I never got to put a face on because I was having so much difficulty with my Wi-Fi. I just put on lip gloss and they were like, you looked great. You looked great. So then I thought, why am I stressing this? Yeah. Like at this point, even if I'm watching someone who's broadcasting from home, I'm not looking at them like, do they have on eyeliner? You know,
right.
If and dressed and smiling, it's all good. It's all good. And it's all we need right now.
Yeah, I know that you've had to, you know, like most of us, you have experienced a lot of milestones in the last several months in your house. You've had graduation with your daughter moving up. She's about to start high school. You've had weddings. You've had losses. You've had date nights. You had all manner of things that normally, you know, there would be a very different reality around. And I would imagine everybody sort of looking to you to like, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to celebrate? How are you going to make this happen? Right. So, you know, how have you navigated that? Because I do think motherhood in this time, it is its own thing, right? It does demand creativity in a way that it never did before. It demands endurance in a way that it hasn't really before. It demands real life caregiving, even of older kids, in a way that it hasn't for any of us before, because the anxiety levels are so high and the uncertainty stretches on and on. What have you called on within yourself for the examples of mothering that you've been blessed by to step into this moment in a way that really fortifies your family?
Well, I have to start with you because you did that video where you were saying things to the camera, but you were holding up signs quite to the contrary. And it was really, really funny. And I did one of those myself.
You did.
About all of these, you know, things that I was doing. So I know one of my signs, like I'm saying, I can manage all of this. It's fine. I've got it. And one of my signs said, do you know how many effing times I load the dishwasher in one day? So part of it is making fun of what's happening and recognizing on a daily basis, it is not normal.
Yeah.
It's not normal. This is not how it's supposed to be. Yes, you have to adjust to it, but you don't have to get used to it and accept it as if it's normal. Then there have been these acknowledgments that business travel was allowing for separation from certain things. Like you have like a separation from, there's a routine to business travel, but then there's a separation from home and a separation from the office. So when you return to those things, you know, the absence makes the heart grow fonder adage, it works. But when your office is at home and home is at home and no one ever leaves, ever, you really find out, like, do I like these people?
Right.
Because
right.
Yeah, I don't.
Right. Does presence make the heart grow fonder? That's the question.
So do they like me? You know, because the one who nitpicks and, you know, is the neat freak and the organizer is here all the time. Like, I can't imagine how they feel, because on a regular basis, I was gone a couple times a month, you know, once a week on a trip somewhere. And it's like, damn, she ain't leaving yet. When is she gonna get out of here? So it's recognizing those things, but then in those moments of getting through the difficulty, there's so many great conversations and there's connection. And I remember when I was outside in the backyard with Becca, and we were talking about Father's Day and what to do for Father's Day. And somehow the conversation of movies came up, because Gordon and I both love going to the movies, and you can make both of us very happy with a movie night. Like, that's always a good thing. And the conversation came up, like, wish we could go to the movies. And then Becca said something like, maybe we could watch a movie outside. Can we bring a TV outside? And then that got into the outdoor projector, and we're out in the backyard with Gordon in the backyard, and she and I are like texting each other and looking on Walmart and figuring it out. And then Father's Day ended up being a really great movie night. It was lots of fun. I don't know that would have happened if I had been traveling.
Right.
Because you would have put something together, you know, you would have gone out. It still would have been nice, but there was something really kind of magical about turning your backyard into a movie theater. That was just, I just don't know if it would have happened otherwise.
Teenager, you talked about Becca, your daughter, turned 14 just a little while ago, which brings its own level of stuff, right? So I know she cut her hair, she dyed it blonde, and she is constantly every day kind of in that phase of her life where the changes are very much apparent, even if the setting is staying the same.
Right, right.
So I know she's about to start high school, and there are all these crazy questions and uncertainties and trial and error realities around going back to school. How are you sort of fortifying her through this transition to teenagehood and high school and whatever that's going to look like? And how are you dealing with it yourself? Because, you know, there's the child's reality, which I think every mother is dealing with, but there's another reality, which you don't really have the child to go to help you in that reciprocal way. So how are you navigating all this back to school stuff?
If you asked her right now, she would tell you that I'm failing miserably. I'm doing an awful job because I didn't let her go a half an hour away on public transportation with her friends just a little while ago to go get cookies or something like that. And, you know, so if you ask her, I'm failing. I'm not doing a good job. The whole parenthood thing is very interesting. And I have to say that I'm grateful that Gordon and I knew and had the means to seek out counseling with our children when they needed it and when we needed it, because having a therapist help you navigate those things is so much better than you just trying to figure it out for yourself. And, you know, well, this is how I was parented and this is what my mother did, and I'm just going to do that and it's going to work, because everybody is different. And not all of those things really did work for us. We just may have turned out okay. But we all know that there were times when we were told not to speak up. And then now we find ourselves in conference rooms and boardrooms struggling to speak up because we didn't get to learn that and learn how to do it and when to do it. So I'm grateful that I have the resource of people to help me parent and to let me know when I can let go of something, even though it's driving me crazy that I have to let it go. Just let that go. Don't worry about that. Like, we went through a couple days where the shower just wasn't on the agenda. And, you know, we're all home. So like,
so please God, shower.
Right. It's got an agenda. And when I was discussing it and bringing it up and mentioning it, it wasn't making it any better. And when I listened to the therapist and let it go and didn't mention it, it resolved itself. And then I had to, you know, recognize that I'm 58 and I'm an adult and I'm struggling with quarantine. So why should the 14-year-old have it figured out? Why? She can't go outside. She hasn't been physically around her friends in months. She doesn't go to school. School is a computer screen in her room. She can't go to dance class. We haven't gone on vacation like we normally do. She hasn't been in a pool all summer. Like, these are things that are not normal and not fair. So I have to respect that it's not normal and it's not fair. And when I can, let certain things go, because in the grand scheme of things, you didn't shower for 2 days. Okay, you're not going to die as long as you get in there the third day. But the shower is fixed.
The rest of us might, but you won't.
I don't know that she's gross or anything, because but it's
Yes, it's not going anywhere. I think we've all been there. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are the things, you mentioned, I know that Becca is different for you because A, she's your baby, and B, she's your first girl. She's your only girl. Girls, boys, we're just different. Like, I think if we embrace that reality when we were very young, we would all get along a lot better as we got older. We're just different, right? Parenting a girl is different. But what are the things, I know you revered your mother, thus Carol's Daughter, the name of your company. The world is so different. This moment is so different, but what are the things that you took from your own mother that have absolutely stood the test of time, even this time?
When I stop in the middle of the day and I make myself a cup of tea. And that doesn't happen every day. There's just certain days when I know I need to do that. And that it was something that I learned from my mom, and she never really explained it to me. I just sort of figured it out after she was gone. So I would talk to her. She would ask me, what's going on? You sound like you're stressed out. I would tell her what was going on. And then she would say, do me a favor, make yourself a cup of tea and then call me back. And I would go make a cup of tea and then I would call her back. And after she was gone and I didn't have those conversations, I still said, well, if mommy was here, she would tell me to go make a cup of tea and call her back. So I would go and make the cup of tea, and then I would kind of sit down next to her picture or just sort of imagine that I was talking to her. And what I realized that was the act of going and making the cup of tea, taking the mug, selecting the tea, boiling the water, being careful because you've boiled water, sitting down, letting it cool off to the point where you could sip. It's all kind of like sitting down and slowing your breath and being in a little bit of a meditation. You stop. In order to make the cup of tea, you have to stop the swirl and whatever else it is that's happening. And it's a really good trick that has served me well, that I learned from her. Like, sometimes you just have to stop the swirl and make a cup of tea. And when you take that breath, sometimes you can hear what your next step should be. And sometimes you just hear, be still, and it's one of the things that I've appreciated about quarantine. Yes, we're busy, and yes, we're on a schedule. And yes, we have a lot to do because it's all happening in our own world. But if we do it well, we actually realize how much control we have over all of it. Where when you physically leave home and go someplace and you're in someone else's space and environment, you give up some of that control because you're not in your home. But being here, I've learned this is important, this is not important. I actually don't have to do this now. I can do this in an hour, or actually do it tomorrow, because it enables me to do these other three things. And I think when we get back to the travel and the leaving and the moving and the doing, I'm going to have a lot more discernment when I make those decisions, because you're forced to figure it out in the house, because you can't go from the moment you open your eyes. And that's what happens at home. It's just like this.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that. What sorts of changes, right now we are having to adapt on a daily basis and do whatever we have to do to get through the day. And some habits are being ingrained, but I think there's just a sense of temporariness, right? We don't know when it's going to give way, but hanging on to the idea that it will is part of what's helping sustain us. But I think there's also a sense that, you know, some of this is worth keeping and some things were not working. You know, I think we've all had those conversations where we've said, we knew we needed a reset, and now we're being forced to have a reset. But I haven't had a lot of conversations that have really delved into what resets we thought we needed to have, you know, because when you're in the swirl, as you say, you're not always taking it to that next step. So what are the sorts of things that you've started to see that it's really good that you've let go of, and that no matter what the new normal is, you want to be intentional about doing things differently? What are those things?
Definitely teleconferencing into meetings. Absolutely. I think we have all learned that we don't have to physically be in the same room to get work done. There is some work where there is a benefit to the fellowship and to being close with someone, especially in my world of beauty, when you're sharing texture and color and fragrance and packaging. A picture doesn't always do it justice, but there are a lot of things that we can manage over the phone. HSN has been getting positive reactions to consumers just being intrigued, being in the homes of the people that they've followed for so long and shopped with for so long, to be in someone's studio, to be in their office, to see their dog, to sometimes see their children on camera. So I think there may be shifts in how many times you have to fly to the studio to do a show. It may not be every single show once we're, you know, able to come out of this, because it's had a positive response. I like the school schedule being able to be flexible. I do want Becca to get to the point where she can have in-person school, because that socialization is important. But I like that schools are looking at hybrids and, you know, 2 days on campus, 2 days off. And in her school anyway, giving the students that flexibility, you know, going forward, because sometimes just the energy of having to get up and get out is not always there, but the energy to work and to get work done is still there. But the presentation part of it is not always there. So I think those things will definitely remain. And I'm learning better about letting certain things go, because I haven't had the pressure of, well, I have to get it done tonight because tomorrow I'm on a plane. And even if tomorrow I'm on a plane, I still know that I could leave those dishes in the dishwasher. I know that better now than I did before.
But not in the sink, maybe. Like, I can leave the dishes in the dishwasher, clean, by the way, but not in the sink. Yeah. Congratulations, Lisa. That's awesome. No, but I know what you mean. Listen, baby steps, right? Baby steps. What have you, you know, what have you discovered about yourself that you really didn't realize before? What has surprised you about you in the midst of all of this?
I am very surprised at how much I can manage at one time, because there are days when you do feel like you're just gonna break, and then you don't. And it's not because, like, I don't want it to sound like I'm Superwoman and I'm so amazing, and not at all. But you recognize that you're not in a good place in that moment. And you either go and take a bath, or you call a friend, or you turn on a tried and true movie that, you know, just helps you out, or you just sit and be quiet but you actually figure it out. Like you figure out which one of those things am I going to do. You're not just stuck in the yuck. And I used to get stuck. Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to turn. And I've surprised myself at figuring that out. I've also surprised myself with the regularity in my workouts. I used to think that I needed to leave home to work out because it needs to be, this commitment, and this other person is on the other side waiting for me, and I've got to go there and do this. And, with technology, I call them up on the phone, on FaceTime, I put my music on in my basement and I work out. And it's much more regular than when I was going to the gym. Now, I would still like to go to the gym because there are things at the gym that I just not going to have in my basement. But I don't feel like I have to go to the gym every single time, because working out at home has become a much more routine thing. There are less interruptions working out here than having to go someplace and work out. And I didn't think that would happen. It was one of the first things that I worried about with the quarantine. Like, holy crap, how am I going to keep up my workouts? Like, I can't not work out. And I've been great.
Yeah, I think part of that too is because you've been so intentional about self-care in this time. I know not every second, not every day as much as you want to be, but it's very clear that you have not let you slip to the bottom, right, of the barrel and of all of the obligations, which I think is something that as women in particular, we struggle with ongoing. But you seem to have a heightened sense in this period that, nope, I'm not dropping out of my own sense of what needs to be. One of the things that I've always really appreciated about you is that you are very intentional and generous in honoring the living. I feel like you always acknowledge birthdays, even of people you've only admired and not necessarily known. And you also honor losses, right? You always commemorate, the day Prince died. I know you're a huge Prince fan. The day Aaliyah died, and just icons, Whitney, people who you've just admired. And I think that consistency is something that I've always noticed with you. And in this period, where such an extraordinary number of people have been lost and such an extraordinary number of people are grieving. One of the things that I sort of wrestle with is that the number starts to overshadow the individuals. When the numbers soar past 100,000 people or more, I feel like we lose sight of all of these actual people and the families, right, that they've left behind. So I'm just curious, as you go forward, I know that Carol's daughter, it's a manifestation of your honoring your mother. What do you hope, especially as we face this election and what we pray is a massive change in this country, how do you think about, or how do you hope ultimately we'll honor what has happened now? Because, sort of the premise of this show is, we called it On the Clock because it's like, how do we make these days count instead of just counting the days, right?
Right.
And I don't know that we've figured out yet how we're going to make it so that people haven't just gone off and faded into the ether, but that their losses have mattered. They've meant something because we are going to collectively do better. So have you thought about that at all? Do you have any sense of that?
Ooh, wow.
I know it's a big question.
CBS is news that I watch, I guess, more regularly than, you know, ABC or NBC. And they, on a weekly basis, acknowledge people that have passed since this has been going on. And, you know, sometimes it's a celebrity that you know, or a politician or something. And then sometimes it's a teacher, you know, and someone that you don't know. And I think that there will be more of those. There will be stories told about this time. So I think going forward, we'll probably get to that space where we can talk about what happened to a particular person. You know, like there's a guy in Brooklyn that, well, he was in Brooklyn because he passed away, that I never met but knew of because he was an entrepreneur in Brooklyn, and, you know, he had a business in Brooklyn, and people in the neighborhood knew him and knew of him. And then, of course, there's people who knew him well. You know, like, you hope that that person's story becomes a story that we can read or see, because there's so much more to him other than the fact that he lost his life to COVID. You know, there was a lot more that he did for the neighborhood and for the community and for his family that deserves to be told. And maybe because he was a COVID victim, that will help get his story told. At the very beginning of this, a friend of mine sent me a quote from this book of hers about women who run with wolves, something like that. And it talked about how there's a group of people that, you know, they're called upon to be the light, and to not lose themselves, and to stay centered as we go through the crises, because they're going to have to be the ones on the other side when we come through it. And, you know, she sent it to me just as something interesting that she read, and given the time that we were going through, and this is back in March when it was all relatively early. And at that point, I decided for myself, I don't know if God has decided that I'm one of these people, but I'm putting myself in the group. I'm joining. And if they want to kick me out, they can kick me out. But I'm going to be one of those people that I'm going to keep the focus, and I'm going to stay on course, because I'm going to be somebody that's on the other side helping to put things back together. Because I just feel like you can't give up. And I feel like our history teaches us that despite all of the adversity and the trials and tribulations that we go through as Black people, we come through. You know, I listened to somebody in an interview, and someone had asked her, you know, what do you tell somebody when they say they just want to give up, that, you know, that it's all over? And she said, nowhere in our history have we given up. We're still fighting 400 years later. We don't give up. So as bad as this has been, I know that there is a lot of good that will come from it. And as awful as it has been to lose Ahmaud Arbery, and to lose Breonna Taylor, and to lose George Floyd, and to lose Elijah McClain, and anybody else that we've lost whose name I just don't happen to know because they're not a hashtag, the world is finally paying attention to that. And that ripple is becoming more of a wave. And while we may not feel it immediately, and while there may be a new person's name attached to a hashtag, unfortunately, next week, it will change. It will, because it's too top of mind, and it's on too many people's mouths, and the veil is lifted. You know, there are stories that Black people are sharing with white people that white people have not heard before, that they have to listen to. And Black people are hearing stories that they haven't heard before. I thought that I was knowledgeable. I thought that I was woke. And there are so many things that I have heard about in the past couple of months where I'm like, wait, that's why that's like that? That happened? You know, I had no idea that the science of gynecology was one guy's responsibility, and that he made a lot of the advances in treatments by testing on his slaves without anesthesia. I did not know this. And I thought I knew everything.
Curious, I would be totally remiss if we got off of this without my asking you to speak directly to entrepreneurs, because we've lost a lot of lives in the last few months, but we've lost a lot of businesses, particularly businesses owned by Black and brown people. And, you know, I've interviewed you many times over the years and followed you from your earliest days. And it's easy when you are now where you are for people to forget where you started and where you were in your business for years before, you know, Carol's Daughter really took off in a very different time than we're in now, right? But you faced a lot of difficult days with your business and a lot of moments where you could have just said, you know what, that's all she wrote. I gave it a good go. And you never did. And you turned some groundbreaking corners at moments when you didn't know those corners were there. You know, you looked out and the map was murky and the fog was low and you really couldn't see, and you kept going on faith and with tremendous fortitude. So in this moment when a lot of entrepreneurs are hurting and the road ahead is very unsure, what can you offer them by way of, you know, just keeping on?
It doesn't sound very businesslike at all. But, you know, a lot of us use the phrase, he didn't bring me here to leave me here. And if you look at your own individual journey and you look at it with that in mind, and if you choose to say, he didn't bring me here to leave me here, or if you want to say, this is not what my mother prayed for me, or if you want to say, I didn't work this hard just to be average, however it is that you need to frame it up for you, you do that, and then look at your situation and allow the answer to come through. Because maybe the business needed to end because there's something else that's coming. Maybe you needed to go through, I put my all into it, I've just opened up my doors, this was supposed to happen, that was supposed to happen, and then COVID happened and it shut it all down. And then maybe 2 or 3 years from now, when you come back again, you're going to come back differently because you experienced COVID. You may discover a whole new way of doing business that doesn't require a brick and mortar, or a different way of doing brick and mortar. I just believe that when you're on the path that you're supposed to be on, even when you encounter difficulties, even when you fail, even when you hit the wall, get knocked down, and then you sit up to try to see, how can I get around it? If your path really is on the other side of that wall, somebody's going to show you how to get around it. It's going to happen. But we've been led to believe that if we do everything that we're supposed to do, things will work out. If we're smart, things will work out. If we're pretty, things will work out. If we have money, things will work out. And that isn't how life is. And sometimes we have to get told to sit down and be quiet and listen and don't move and don't go anywhere and go in your room. Sometimes you need those things to hear and to see what else there is. But no matter what it is, don't blame yourself for that failure, because nobody ever saw COVID before. And the biggest companies on the planet are still kind of like, how do we figure this out? So if you're a small business and you failed at this time, okay, it's actually easier for you to start over than Delta. Delta can't start over. Southwest can't start over. They can't. They got to ride this out. And it's rough and it's hard, and maybe they'll make it, maybe they won't. You can start over. It's a lot easier for you to start over. If you had that first idea in you, you got about 12 more.
There was a meme that went around not too long after this started that said it feels like we've all collectively been sent to our rooms. And so when you said, sometimes you get sent to your room and you got to use that time to figure it out, so we all collectively been sent to our rooms, and there is an opportunity baked into that. I'm so glad you, got sent to your room with me today. And I'm so glad that all of you who joined in today. Lisa, it's always such a pleasure. Stay safe and stay well. Everybody, stay safe and stay well.
Thank you. Be blessed.